So today, all of you chose to come to this Yom Kippur service we call Unplugged. We take this day, these few hours, to unplug ourselves from our daily routines, to unplug from our business and all of the things that hold us down every day, all our worldly concerns, to unplug from technology. This last one, technology, is especially hard for many of us. For some of us, even harder than the coffee and water that we have to relinquish today. So now I'm going to ask you to do something a little unusual, maybe even sacrilegious. Many of you brought a phone with you today into this chapel, right? Raise your hands. Okay, if you did, I ask you momentarily to take it out. And I'm going to ask you to hold it in your hands. Look at it. Think about what it means to you. Some of you may have checked it during services. Not going to ask who. Maybe you didn't check it, but you wanted to. Felt the urge to. These devices, our iPhones, Blackberries, Strawberries, Samsungs, have become extensions of who we are. They are like our phantom limbs. They contain our world in our pocket, our contacts, our email messages, our photographs, everything. The poet Marie Howe recently commented that the face she looks into the most is the face of her iPhone. Now I'm going to ask you to put them away. You know, there's this Star Trek episode I remember, Star Trek: The Next Generation with Captain Picard, not Captain Kirk. And if you've seen it, you're probably going to remember it too, because it was eerie and alarmingly prescient, as many Star Trek episodes are. And in it, you see this new game that's become popular aboard the Starship Enterprise. Everyone's wearing this band around their heads with a little screen in front of their eyes. And they're playing this game, which is hypnotic. The crew looks like zombies walking around the starship. Their eyes are all glued to the screen. All everyone wants to do is play the game constantly. People stop talking to each other. People stop attending to their responsibilities on the starship. Finally, just in the nick of time, Captain Picard realizes that it's part of an enemy plot to take over the ship. And he stops it, and the ship is saved, just like it is all the time. But what's uncanny is that that game looks exactly like Google Glass, the technology which is just about to come out, through which you can play games, connect to the internet, take photographs, talk on the phone. It's hard to imagine that there's going to be new technology that's going to captivate us even more than what we already have. But there'll always be the next thing. Now, don't get me wrong, I love technology. I love my iPhone. I do. I love that I can talk to my daughters in St. Louis or Orlando or even Alaska this past summer while I was walking the dog here on Miami Beach. I love that I can look up what Rashi said about a particular Torah portion while I'm parked in the carpool lane at my daughter's school. I love that I can get that energy rush from the ping I hear when I play 7 little words and I get one right. even while I'm waiting in line somewhere. As someone once said, it's like having a little Times Square in my pocket. All lights, all the people I could meet. Between our Kindles, our iPads, our smartphones, our laptops, we don't ever have to be bored again. My phone makes me feel connected and secure. I want it with me, as the Ve'ahavta prayer says, when I'm in my house and when I walk by the way, when I lie down and when I rise up. But you know, what started as a tool of connection, a device that was supposed to simplify our lives, has in fact, in many ways, I think, distanced us from our loved ones and made our lives maybe even more complicated than they have to be. The Wall Street Journal recently published a list of 10 signs that your device is hurting your relationships. So I'm going to say them, and I want you to think about how many of these apply to you. Number 1, you can't get through a meal without emailing, texting, or talking on the phone. 2, you look at more than one screen at a time. Checking email while watching television, for example. 3, you regularly email or text other than for something urgent while your partner or another family member is with you. 4, you sleep with your phone near you and you check your email or your text while you're in bed. 5, you log on to your computer while you're in bed. 6, you've had an argument with a loved one about your use of technology. 7, you text or email while you're driving. 8, you no longer go outside for fun. 9, you never turn off your phone. 10, when you spend time with your family, a meal, a drive, hanging out, each person is looking at a different screen. Yikes. I know I'm in trouble, and I'm sure many of you are in trouble too. In ancient times, like when I was young, when we wanted to talk to somebody who was far away, we wrote a letter. And if we could afford it, we made a long-distance phone call. My husband always talks about how when his mom made a long-distance phone call when he was growing up, she would set the egg timer so she wouldn't stay on the phone for too long. In time, the answering machine came into being. Now we could call people and leave a message so they would know that we were thinking about them, even if we didn't get to talk. Yet, this new device also allowed us to screen our calls or to call someone purposely when we knew they weren't going to be home, just so we could say what we needed to say and be done with it. But then even a phone call became inconvenient. Email became a more efficient tool for a quick message. Now the human voice was left out of the exchange altogether. And even then, email was surpassed by the text message. Somehow, what was once considered the next best substitution for conversation became preferable. After all, it's so much easier to send a text than make a call. So much easier to write an email than schlep somewhere to talk to somebody. As Jonathan Safran Foer says, somehow the diminished substitute has become the norm. And the problem with that is that we too have become diminished substitutes in that process. All this technology is literally rewiring human relationships. we are left connected with an infinite number of people without being truly present for anyone, not even ourselves. How many times have you been with a friend or a partner or a child or a parent, and they get a text or a call, and they put you on pause while they attend to something that's definitely more important than your conversation? Or maybe it's you putting them on pause. Somehow, all of us have become pausable. For many of us, the phone comes wherever we go. The dinner table, temple, the classroom. I've seen couples in restaurants, I know you have too, where each of them is on their own device and there's never any conversation back and forth. I've sat in meetings and lectures and even funerals where people are on their phones, texting, reading email, maybe even shopping, I don't know. Sherry Turkell, who's author of a new book called Alone Together, says that her students have told her about a new skill they've developed. It involves maintaining eye contact with someone that you're talking to while at the same time texting somebody else. It's apparently hard, but with some practice, it can be done. I felt this recently at our daughter, Hannah, who I've already asked to forgive me for sharing this story. I felt it at her college graduation. You know, after the graduation, Adam, Noah, Hannah, and I all went out to lunch to celebrate the graduation. And we were all basking in the glory of the day, and Hannah was happy and cheerful and engaged and funny. And she was there with us, but she wasn't entirely with us because she was in constant contact with her people. You know, I'm sure they were sharing details about where they were at lunch and family foibles and who knows what else. And I knew at that moment that all around St. Louis, every family was experiencing the same thing. Their children were there, but not completely there. From what I understand, in today's world, technology has engendered a new anxiety in young adults called FOMO, fear of missing out. There may be something better than what I'm doing right now, or someone better with whom to do it, and so I have to remain plugged in so I don't miss out on whatever that thing is. But I have to say, honestly, it's not only our kids who are distracted, we are too. In fact, some of them have learned from us. This may be the first generation of kids growing up who have to compete for their parents' attention at vacation, the dinner table, in carpool. And it starts as early as texting while breastfeeding. It does. From infancy to retirement, technology trespasses on the most intimate recesses of our lives. This new book, Good Night iPad, is a parody on just that. I recently read a letter written to the editor of the New York Times by a man named Flattery Jameson. He was recounting this story. He wrote, "I was on my phone once in the middle of a very important medical regulatory review meeting that had come up unexpectedly while I was on vacation with my boys and my mother. It was my birthday, and we were on our way out to celebrate when the phone rang. They were waiting for me. My 9-year-old son walked up to me, snatched the phone out of my hand, ran to my mother's terrace, and dangled it over the 10th floor balcony. We all crave attention. We want to know that we matter. Simone Weil wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity, and yet we all seem to be getting less and less attention, less intimacy, less relationship." But it's not only our friends and our family and our colleagues who are missing out, it's ourselves. With the constant distraction of DVRs, iPads, Angry Birds, we don't ever have to be alone with ourselves. Our devices allow us a diversion, a hedge against emptiness and boredom. You know, we use them to distract ourselves from ourselves, to keep from confronting the reality of who we are, of what our life is, and ultimately they keep us from fully inhabiting our lives. The moment we have an uncomfortable emotion, we can text a friend to process it. Rather than confronting anxiety or fear, we can watch a DVR'd episode of Parks and Rec or Modern Family. What used to be alone time, like walking the dog or exercising, can now be filled with the distraction of a movie or music. Where there were once quiet, routine moments of life, there's now static and noise. We have forgotten how to be alone with ourselves. But what we're ultimately avoiding, I think, is an opportunity for reflecting and thinking, for connecting with our interior lives, for cultivating our souls. Unplugging, allowing ourselves to be idle, alone, yes, maybe even a little bored, is what allows us to gain clarity, to make unexpected connections, to feel strokes of inspiration, maybe even to pursue a hobby. As mindfulness guru Jon Kabat-Zinn states, technology is 24/7, but we are not. So what are we to do? How can we remain plugged in to life in the 21st century and at the same time disconnect enough to engage in really living our lives? I think our first step is to think about what role technology plays in our lives and to consciously reflect on whether it has impoverished us. If it has, we need to set up boundaries, clear fences to protect what is sacred from being invaded and overrun. Thank you. So for those of us who have allowed technology to permeate all areas of life, even the synagogue on Yom Kippur, even the bathroom, do you know how many of these get thrown in the toilet or dropped in the toilet every year? Weaning ourselves is not going to be easy. You know, I recently read about technology-free camps that help adults to liberate themselves from the chains of technology. So when they check into camp, people have to check in their computers, their tablets, their phones. And at the beginning of camp, I'm told that participants feel untethered, surreal, anxious. But after a few days, they begin to remember what it's like to have a conversation, what it's like to be idle. One participant said, "I did a lot of listening to my own self, That's a remarkable thing. For most of us, going to a technology camp isn't accessible, it's too expensive or too far away, and we need to find ways to liberate ourselves where we live. We have to define sacred spaces that will be technology-free. What will those places be? The kitchen table? The bedroom? The carpool when we pick up our children from school? And these can't just be rules that we enforce on our kids, they have to be rules that we impose on ourselves too. Even Eric Schmidt, the executive chairman of Google, told graduates at Boston University this year, "You can't let technology rule you. Remember to take 1 hour a day and turn that thing off. Do the math. 1/24. Go dark. Shut it down. Take your eyes off the screen and look into the eyes of a person that you love." For Jews, you know, that's what Shabbat is all about. It's a guide for creating sacred space in our lives, a tradition that has helped to sustain our people since the beginning of time. Shabbat is meant to be a conscious pause in our lives for reflecting and rebooting, a time to reconnect with our nefesh, our souls. You know, the ability to pause, to self-regulate, is actually one of the things that differentiates us from animals. It can be a simple yet powerful antidote to the frenetic control that technology has on us. In yoga, we learn that the most important pose is Shavasana, the pose that comes at the end of class. Shavasana is just a laying down pose. So for those of us who are so busy running around all the time, it's tempting to want to skip that pose because you're just laying there. What good can that do? But yogis say that it's that pose, that resting, that is the most important pose for us to absorb the benefit of the practice. It's that final pose that helps us to re-energize ourselves in order to re-engage with the world at the end of class. Shavasana is the Shabbat of yoga. For Shabbat is meant to help us rest and refresh ourselves so at the end of Shabbat, we can re-engage with the world and return to our lives restored. I remember when I was a child, my mother used to smoke cigarettes. And every Shabbat, she stopped smoking for 24 hours. In reflecting back on this, I was thinking that maybe it was her way of exerting control, her own mastery over a habit, rather than letting it control her. And I was thinking that that might work for us too. There's this Jewish organization called Reboot, and in its Shabbat manifesto, it has avoid technology as its #1 principle. And to that end, they have produced handy-dandy cell phone sleeping bags. But if putting your cell phone to sleep for 24 hours seems like too radical an idea, maybe there's a more modest step that we can take. My New Year's pledge is to stop using technology on Shabbat, except for speaking on the phone to family and maybe a few friends. But no email, no internet surfing, no gratuitous texting. And now that I've told everyone here, I am forced to stick with it. And I hope that some of you will consider joining me in that pledge. We can start a support group for each other. I'm hoping that these 24 hours each week of being unplugged is going to help me slow down from the instant gratification of hitting reply. It's going to help me to be more considered and reflective, and to focus on the people in front of me, with me, and on myself too. Stephen Vincent Benet wrote, "Life is not lost by dying. Life is lost minute by minute, day by dragging day, in 1,000 small, uncaring ways." Let us not forfeit this precious life by being half asleep, half present, half noticing of the urgent and pressing miracles of our lives. Let us learn to press pause, not to silence each other, but to silence technology, that noise and clamor. When Henry David Thoreau described his famous trip to Walden Pond, he said, "I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I too had not lived." May we too find ways to live deliberately. May the conscious reflection of being unplugged help us to restore balance to our lives, intimacy to our relationships, and awareness of the extraordinary, fleeting moments of our lives. Amen.